Hello everybody, Mark here with your first playlist video for 2019. Now I've got a great deal of games to talk about in this video because this is the first proper one I've done of these since the end of November. So I've got all of December's games, all of January's games, and all of the stuff I played over the Christmas break. So I'm just going to jump straight on into it with the first game I want to talk about, which is Below. So this is a game about exploring a mysterious and enigmatic island. It comes from Cappy Games, who made Super Time Force and worked with some guys on Sword and Sorcery. This is been in development for a very long time. Microsoft scooped up console exclusivity on the Xbox One. The game finally came out to pretty mixed reviews, I have to say, and my own opinion of it is also quite mixed. I really enjoyed this game when I first started playing it. It's very mysterious and it very much doesn't tell you anything about the game. It reminds me of the original Dark Souls and the original Legend of Zelda in that you're kind of just sort of wandering around, not really sure how anything works. The game is not giving you any sort of upfront tutorials, and you're kind of poking and prodding and just playing the stuff until you figure out exactly how the world works, and you kind of gain this level of understanding. And you also have that with the exploration of the island. You start to learn how it's put together and how it links up, and that's really nice. But then you die. You'll inevitably die because the game's combat is very hard, and it's quite difficult to create the sort of weapons that you need to last against these enemies. And the game sends you back to the beginning because this is actually a roguelike, and a number of the areas in the game then get randomly jumbled up, and you kind of have to figure out things again. And it was this sort of disconnect between wanting to explore, but then also having the world regularly jumbled up. That sort of disconnect made it very difficult for me to enjoy it. I really wanted to explore this world and kind of get to know it in the way that you do in Dark Souls and Zelda, but the roguelike aspects made that essentially impossible. It was sort of constantly on this sort of balance of understanding and coming to grips with things, and then not understanding at all and completely losing my place. And I felt like this just didn't really work for me in the way that I think the developers wanted. And I was left wondering, should this have been a roguelike at all, or just a more interesting sort of exploration of this deep, scary world? Maybe that was just my own experience with the game, but it was certainly a game that I enjoyed at the start, and I loved finding out more about it and this cool crafting system that it's got, and finding keys and locks and all that sort of stuff. But the more I died and the more I realised that I was just going to have to keep relearning the world and keep going deeper and going back through the areas I've already gone through, I just kind of lost the enthusiasm for it, which is a shame because I definitely like this game. It's a shame. So, as you might have seen, I played a lot of stealth games these past few months. I played through Metal Gear Solid 1 for the first time ever. I know, weird. Just never really got to it before. Quite liked that. It was fun. Definitely a cultural artifact that I needed to see. Same with Metal Gear Solid 2, which, I didn't really get a lot of it. I was kind of snoozing through a lot of the cutscenes, I have to say, so I didn't really get the full gist of the game. But the advancements to the stealth genre, as seen in that sequel, are very cool, and I wish I had kind of been there when the whole protagonist switch out happened. That seems like it would have been a fun sort of media frenzy. Unfortunately, I was more on playing GameCube stuff when Metal Gear Solid 2 came out, so it kind of passed me by. But anyway, I also played a lot of Thief: The Dark Project, a small amount of Tenchu, but another game I played was Sly Cooper. So this game comes from Sucker Punch Productions, who make the infamous games, and they're working on Ghost of Tsushima or something. But this was kind of their first major game series, 3 Sly Cooper games for the PlayStation 2 back in the day. And these are platformers, 3D platformers, kind of like Mario or Banjo-Kazooie. They're a bit more linear at times. But they have this sort of light stealth system to them. There are enemies with torches, and you can't get into their torch beams. You kind of have to sneak up behind them. You can get into barrels and sort of sneak up on enemies when they're not looking. There are laser force fields to jump through and searchlights to avoid. All sorts of things like this. It kind of has just a very light stealth element. It's not sitting around for ages watching guard patterns, but kind of giving you that feeling of being a sort of Solid Snake or a Garrett from Thief, but very quick and easy and accessible. And I really like that. And so when the game is like that, it's really good. But this was kind of an era where it was a sort of anything goes. Every idea we have to kind of throw on the disc for the player. And so you end up with this game where there is just so much random stuff to do. Every time you sort of finish a traditional platforming level, it's going to throw at you a driving level, a sort of sniper level, twin stick shooter, a thing where you're attacking chickens, just these weird kind of mini games, and they are hit and miss, and for the most part they're kind of miss, to be honest. It's annoying to get to a boss battle and it suddenly just throws at you a sort of Guitar Hero DDR style rhythm game, and if it hasn't taught you anything about this and you're just kind of like having to learn it for the first time in the middle of a boss battle, and the driving physics are bad, and it's just kind of like, I wish it was a bit more focused on what the game did really well. I'm interested to see what they do with Sly Coopers 2 and 3, though I hear there's still a lot of mini-games in those. But yeah, this was a cool idea, but kind of, I wish they'd kind of just focused a bit more on what made this game so good. Okay, so the first game of 2019 I was really looking forward to is this game called Vane. So it comes from a team in Tokyo called Friend and Foe, and a lot of the people who work there used to work at Team Ico, making games like Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian. And you can definitely tell it's definitely a game in that vein. It is a game without words, it is a game that is kind of mysterious, it's about exploring, there's not a lot of combat, it's a game that doesn't really tell you stuff up front, and in a way it's kind of like Below, you just have to kind of figure things out for yourself and come to understand the rules of the world in a way that's really interesting. You start to understand what these different items do and how you use them, and that helps you solve puzzles. So a lot of the puzzle solving is just kind of understanding the kind of the rules and the conventions and the grammar of the world. And in some ways, Vane explains this really nicely. For example, there's a puzzle where you have to land birds on a platform to lower it down, and you can see very clearly in the game that when you have, say, 3 birds on it, the platform doesn't quite lower enough, so you need a few more birds, and you kind of get that, and it's sort of the what you need to do is very clearly explained. But other times in the game, not so much, and you're kind of just left wandering around, not really sure what's happening. There's also the case that the game is a bit sort of buggy and cumbersome, and the controls are a bit clumsy, and it's not very easy or fun to get anywhere, though you could have those same arguments against The Last Guardian. But I think the main downfall is that these games, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian, were really about something, and they used their mechanics to talk about relationships and themes in ways that was very clever and in ways that a lot of games don't do. And I found that a number of these games that kind of try and copy that style just kind of don't, are kind of just sort of vague and unspecific, and just kind of resting on this idea of, isn't it freaky because there's just not much going on, and you're kind of in this weird desert place, and it's like, that's not enough, there's reason to Shadow of the Colossus, there's meaning to The Last Guardian, and games like this, like Vane and Rime, don't really have it. Journey, however, that definitely does, and I think really works because of it. So yeah, anyway, so Vane, it's got some good ideas, but it just kind of feels a bit empty and a bit pointless in a way, and I was left pretty much wanting, didn't finish the game, and I can kind of see why it's got some pretty lackluster reviews. Okay, so Resident Evil 2 Remake came out this week, obviously, this month, and I played through the original game on PlayStation 1 as a bit of a refresher. I'd already played it before, ages ago, but wanted to get it fresh in my mind so I could see the differences and similarities with the new game. So Resident Evil 2 on PS1 is really fun. It's kind of similar to the first game. It's using the fixed camera angles, so every area in the game is actually a sort of pre-rendered background from a very specific camera angle, and then your 3D character walks around on top of that, and you've got these kind of clumsy tank controls, but it all adds to the sort of environment of fear in that you can't see certain enemies because they're off camera. It's not easy to run away from things. It can be used in nice ways to kind of set up character introductions and spooky stuff. The introduction of the licker in Resident Evil 2 is really well done. The camera cuts to a window and you see the licker run past. There are like blood dripping down, things like that, set up really nicely. So there are some very good advantages to the fixed camera angle. So my biggest sort of curiosity with Resident Evil 2 is how is it going to maintain that level of kind of disempowerment without the fixed camera angle? Because if you've seen this game, you'll know that they've gone away from that original design and gone to a style popularized by Resident Evil 4, which is the behind-the-back, third-person, sort of Uncharted, Tomb Raider, typical third-person shooter campaign. Dead Space, Evil Within, all of these games kind of doing the same thing. But what I found interesting is that the game has still found lots of ways to kind of disempower you and make you feel still kind of scared and like you are without much hope. So one way they do that is to put in a lot more zombies. Another way they do that is to have zombies be able to break through doors and through windows, so it doesn't sort of feel like you're compartmentalized into these different rooms that you can kind of clear out and make safe, but more zombies will flood in as the game goes on. There's a lot of stuff done with the torch in the game. Areas are very dark, and Leon's torch only kind of lights up maybe the middle half of the game's screen, so you've got these dark areas on the side that you just don't really know what's there. And of course there's Mr. X, this sort of tyrant-style baddie who chases you around the police station. He stomps around and chases you down and tries to kill you. In the original game, he was only in the second campaign that you played, but in this remake, he is everywhere, and he does not let you have a moment's rest. And his sound design is so good. You can be in rooms and you can hear him stomping around and down hallways around you, and you can know, like, he's gone off, I've got time to make a dash for it. Very well done. The one thing I'll say about Resident Evil 2 that's kind of disappointing is that the first half of the game in the police station is so strong. It's such a fun environment to explore. It's kind of similar to the mansion, but it has its own things, its own ideas. There's this whole idea of it being this like old art gallery turned into a police station, which is kind of explains away all of the weird statues and gems and puzzles and stuff, but it's just great. And then you go into the underground and the sewers and the labs, and they're just not quite as much fun, and it kind of makes the game drag a little bit in the end, I feel. But I'm still enjoying it, and I look forward to finishing the game and then playing through the whole thing again with Claire Redfield. So I've played a small amount of Hades, which is the new game from Supergiant Games, makers of Pyre, Transistor and Bastion. This is their latest game. It's in early access on the Epic Games Store, and it's a roguelike. It's about going down into Hades, the underworld, killing monsters, getting killed, coming back to the hub world and trying again. There's some things I really like about this game. I really like how the different weapons completely change how the game works. You can play this game very much up close and personal with a sword, or you can play this game more hanging back and more tactical with a bow and arrow. And there's other weapons you can unlock as well. The game just feels really good to kill things, kind of similar to Dead Cells in that it is a game that's very crunchy in its combat, and it's also constantly giving you new stuff to play with that makes you just feel more and more powerful as you play. I really like it's got this cool dash move, and you can kind of unlock a black hole that opens up when you dash, so you need to get near enemies and then dash away and it'll suck the enemies in. Very, very cool, works really well, it feels really good. And I also like this idea of getting more character backstory and lore as you play through the game, and kind of finding items in the game world to give to characters in the hub to butter them up and get more stories. I think more roguelikes could do this as a sense of progression, is kind of unveil more and more about the world and the narrative and the story as a way of giving the game progression without changing the difficulty at all, which is something that Hades does do. It has got persistent upgrades. You can throw a projectile at enemies, and you can just unlock the ability to throw more projectiles at enemies, giving you a bit of a leg up. And as I talked about in my video, I don't really find that fun. I prefer the purity of roguelikes, and I prefer to just always have the game's difficulty be kind of flat, so I'm just sort of working on my own skill. But I understand that's a personal thing. This game's cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do more with it, but it seems pretty polished and ready to play now, so if you're on the fence, I'd say, go check it out. It's fun. And finally, it's Slay the Spire. So I played this when I was getting a bit overwhelmed with the scariness of Resident Evil 2. I thought I'll give this a go instead, and got completely hooked on this game. It is a roguelike card battler. You get a small handful of cards, and you use them. They've got things like attacks, defense, buffs, skills, powers, things like that you use against enemies that pop up in the game. And you start with a very small hand of simple cards, but every time you kill an enemy, you're going to get yourself more cards and get yourself more and more power and kind of build a deck as you go along. I really like how you can just get really ridiculously powerful decks, and you can see these great combinations you can have. If you've got a card that can do that turns your block into damage. If you've got 50 block, then you do 50 damage, and then you get a bunch of cards that are all about improving your block. You start to see this potential there for a combo of, okay, I'm going to build up a huge block and then unleash that as a massive combo. That's really fun, and you become this tactician, and you understand these rules, but then you die and you just start again and start with a fresh deck of cards and try something completely different. I think I've always felt kind of overwhelmed by deck building games like Hearthstone and the Pokemon game, because this feeling that how do I build a balanced deck? There's so many cards to pick from, and once you kind of stick with something that works, you kind of stick with it and don't change too much. But this game is all about just making it really easy to build quick decks and then try something else completely different. You're always doing something different in this game, and it feels fantastic. And I've really enjoyed it. I finished it already, and I want to play more. Hopefully this will come out on Switch, because that'd be really fun to be able to play this in bed. It's great. I really, really recommend this game. Slay the Spire. Good fun. And it's a proper roguelike. It's got some upgrades, got lots of upgrades actually. Adds more cards to the potential ones that you can find, so that's sort of, but they're balanced with all the rest of the cards. They're not giving you an advantage. There are new characters you unlock. There are ascensions. You can sort of make the game more difficult, things like that. But this is it's not got that sort of downward slope of difficulty. Anyway, so that's a whole bunch of games, and I hope that was of some interest to you. I will be back at the end of February with some more stuff. Now I'm going to get out of this hot cupboard where I sit to record my voice, and maybe play some Resident Evil 2, or maybe just watch a movie. I don't know. I'll see you later. Cheers.